Technical training is one of the most challenging areas of training, I think, across all the different disciplines and all the different work streams you may have in an organization. My name is Sherry Weppel, Director of Innovation and Strategy for GP Strategies. Been working with the company for about 10 years now. My background is in instructional design, and is actually I did about a 7-year stint as a public school teacher teaching art. And so I've really dealt with the gamut of different types of population, everything from 11, 12, 13-year-olds to that technical training audience. And so everybody has their own dynamics and their own challenges. But as I've worked across sales, regulatory, legal, you know, even a training audience, technical training still strikes me as one of the more challenging areas to train, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the main reasons is that oftentimes they're the population that's left behind. So they'll go with something like on-the-job training, and they'll just have somebody follow somebody else around to get trained, and it's not always effective. And one of the other challenges is that oftentimes the person who's doing any kind of instructor-led or face-to-face training is not actually a trainer. You know, they may be the shift supervisor, they may be a manager, but they're not necessarily somebody who has all of that background in what good training looks like and how to train properly. We sat down as an organization and started to take a look at this, especially as a lot of our technical training clients are currently seeing a big changeover in staff. So we have an aging workforce that's now getting replaced by a newer, you know, fresh out of the public school system workforce, or fresh out of trade school, that we now have this insurgence of needing to be able to do instructor-led training and do it the right way. And a lot of our clients are faced with the fact that in doing that, they're going to have to train a lot of people in a very short period of time, again, without all of those resources that they might normally want. What we've been able to do is we've been able to develop the precision training strategy, which is just, you know, we've all heard of the ADDIE model, which is really going to structure your instructional design and development process. But what the precision training strategy is it's something that's going to help you define how to best develop training for a technical training audience and what things you want to include to best support that population. So I'm not going to go into each of the different components right now because that's what our session is about today. But what we want to do is we want to talk about the precision model. So the precision is going to start with planning for the future, making sure that we're recalling prior knowledge, including example videos, including class activities, including interactive screens, safety information, and then making sure that we have instructor resources, we have on-the-job training, and then we have navigation for our instructors as well to really support them as we go along. This deck was actually developed also using some of the tools and techniques from the precision training model, so I wanted to kind of add that in here as you're going along. So we're going to start with planning for the future, and this is a huge component of technical training right now with that change in population that we're currently seeing. So as we have a population that's changing, we need to be able to be very adept and be prepared for the future. So we want to have this flexible future-forward design. So we want to make sure that the tasks that we have that everybody needs to learn are tied to both instructor-led training and structured on-the-job training. Now, eventually that instructor-led may not be as necessary as we start to get a little bit more tenure in our work population. So we're still going to want that structured on-the-job training to be there to support them. We're going to need to upskill those new employees, but we're also going to need to provide the new hires with any kind of new skills that they might need that maybe they're not bringing to the table. You know, we're used to a population that's bringing a lot of those skills to us. You know, they have that as part of their life's experience. We're not going to have that as much anymore. So that course design plan, which you can see on the right-hand side of the page, is going to be this living, breathing course design plan. Oftentimes we'll actually structure it as having columns that say this is going to be year 1, but this is going to be year 5. So part of that transition might be making components that can be transitioned to e-learning. So developing our instructor-led training in a different way where it almost serves as a storyboard of sorts, so that you can, in an easy 2 or 3 days, turn that into some e-learning and post that online if instructor-led starts to be something that's not good for your population. Especially as you start to transition to that younger audience, they're going to want to learn online. They're going to want to be on their mobile device. You're going to want to focus your time and your attention to that structured on-the-job training component. We also want to make sure that we're recalling that prior knowledge. So we want to shorten that training time. So if we have any of those incumbents or the people who've been in our workforce for quite some time, if we're training everybody all at the same time, we don't want to burden them with a lot of that information that they may already know. So providing ways for them to demonstrate their skills, whether it may be a structured on-the-job training, maybe it may be a pre-assessment, but we want to be able to provide them with additional ways of proving what they already know and maybe testing out of components. Or maybe you'll pull your new hires and have them do some more structured training and then pull your incumbents back in as you start to do some of that structured on-the-job training, pulling those teams back together. Oftentimes we'll incorporate some games, which we'll get to in a little bit, to provide some additional details as well. But this is going to provide commonality for cross-training. Once you've identified what does one population already know, what do you need to upskill in another population, and then get everybody on the same page. So as I click on this, this is actually giving us some performance tasks, allowing an evaluator to test that person to make sure that they have that prerequisite knowledge before moving forward into the rest of the formal training program. We can also have some assessments as well, more of those structured. This can be put online. This can be done on paper depending on who your individual is, but we can do some assessments as well. We also want to think about incorporating some videos, remembering that some of our population may be very new to this particular workforce, so we may be talking about terms that they may not know. Especially as we talk in a heavy manufacturing types of environments, there may be components of the process that they're never going to see because it might be inside of a piece of equipment or it might be in a part of the facility that they don't get to go to. So we want to make sure that we're including some videos as examples. We want to make sure that we're including correct and incorrect examples as well. So, as we talk about how to use things, we want to provide very rich examples. I want to provide examples and with arrows and how to do things properly. As we start to think about class activities, we also want to make sure that we're leveraging that safe environment. So we want to do structured on-the-job training, but we want to make sure that everybody is ready when we get to that point. So as we leverage that safe environment, we want to give them opportunities to demonstrate and perform tasks. Class activities are a great way of doing that. You can create small models of activities. We actually have these industrial-sized training workstations, which actually simulate a lot of the things they might see on their equipment, such as, pumps and valves, and allow them to do some of that maintenance and allow them to do some of that repair in a very structured and safe environment where they're not going to harm themselves, they're not going to harm anybody else. They're also not going to harm the equipment or the facility or the environment for certain cases as well. So we want to make sure that they're using representative tools and equipment, getting some of that practice, making sure that everybody feels comfortable with the tools and the technology that they're going to be using before we actually move them into something that's structured. From a PowerPoint or an instructor-led training example, we also want to talk about having those interactive screens. So having screens where they can link to additional imagery, where we can add some of those animations. And animation doesn't have to be this really robust 3D, immersive type of an environment. It can be. As much as I love doing 3D animation, and I think that there's a lot of benefits to it, we have to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. And so I'll actually be one of the people who pushes back a little bit more on 3D animation than most, because I'll make sure that we're getting the best possible solution. So is it worth it? Is it just adding kind of some sizzle to your training? A lot of times, some of the animations and some of the interactions that you can do can be done so simply, so easily that they can actually still be done in PowerPoint. So we want to think about, as we talk about interactive screens, we want to think about the complex concepts that can't be easily captured in a single image. So I'm going to jump to a couple of these examples where we can actually show where items are held. We have the ability to point out in the overarching map of the system where the different components are, and then we can have some interactive screens after that. Going from that diagram, you can then go to a skills challenge where you can then present the learner with some questions of identifying what those components are, and then you can just simply click on those buttons, and that's going to display what part of the system we're looking at or what subsystem we're looking at. This then very easily translates into an interaction in an e-learning environment if you choose to move to that direction in the future. Just simply clicking on the buttons in whatever order you want. Again, this is all done in PowerPoint. Very, very simple to do, very easy to do, and very editable. Especially if you have a new system that's going into place, having something that's very editable until you've reached a steady state is going to be critical as well. Additionally, we have the ability to simulate flow and to simulate processes. This is sometimes some of the most challenging components to train on because it's hard to kind of capture that system-wide process. So just quickly clicking on the Start button allows you to see where things are going. It allows you to follow that flow. It allows you to see changes as they go through. So it's just another way of capturing that information. We want to make sure that safety is included from a technical training perspective in everything that we do. So safety is the very first thing that we talk about when we go into a training. Safety is something that we talk about with each and every component that we discuss. Safety is something that isn't a simple section or a course that someone takes. Safety is a way of living. Safety is something that we live and breathe and think about every day. So we want to review equipment-based safety as we talk about a new piece of equipment or a subsystem. We want to talk about task-based safety. And again, we want to talk about the ramifications and have safety more as a culture instead of as just a module inside of a lesson. As we talk about instructor resources, this is where we start to get into some of the challenges that we have with having instructors who are going to be training these individuals who don't necessarily have a training background. We've gone everywhere from giving them a different style of mouse or pointer to be able to transition the slides, something that's very easy for them to hold in their hand. They have a tendency to be, our trainers who are training this content have a tendency to be people who are much more comfortable standing, much more comfortable being on the move. So tying them to a podium and having them navigate this mouse is not going to work well for them. So we found this great. It almost looks like a gaming control. It allows them to move about the room, to not have to be tied to any one location. And then we've done things to the program itself to make it so that it's foolproof for them. So what we've done is we've done things like adding visual prompts to the instructors. So for example, if I click on this slide here, you can see that there's a little icon with a toolbox, and so that's going to denote to them that there is an activity. So they're not flipping back and forth with a facilitator's guide or anything like that. Everything's integrated right here for them. When they click on that, that little pop-up appears and reminds them to perform the measuring activity. There's all sorts of different types of things, even to the point of the facilitator's guide is built right into the presentation. So they just switch the mode that they're looking at the slide deck in, and it's going to give them all their facilitator notes. They only have one document that they need to worry about. So it just makes it really a lot easier. At the top, they can see that there's going to be notes for this. There's going to be a question to ask. There's going to be some demonstration, and there's going to be a procedure that they're going to want to follow. So really looking to make this as easy as we possibly can so that everybody can be successful at this. We also want to think about instructor-led training or on-the-job training as well. So beyond just observing somebody else, so it's beyond just having new employee following around existing employee until they feel comfortable. And comfortable is such an awkward term because how do you define that somebody feels comfortable? So we want to talk about what is it that needs to be done, how it needs to be done. We also want to talk about why it needs to be done, along with some cause and effect as well. So really getting beyond just, this is the process that we follow, we've always followed it this way, you do it as I do it, and everything's going to be fine. We're going to include inside of that some facilitator question and answers, some dialogue for them to have, and we want this to make sure that it's critical that structured on-the-job training is consistent so that every employee has the exact same experience and receives the exact same training. We want it to be repeatable, and we want it to be objective. So there's not, as much as you want to say, well, so-and-so's been here a while, we're going to say, yeah, they're good. They've been through enough instructor or on-the-job training that we feel comfortable with them. If they're not truly trained, if they don't truly understand, and if they're not truly capable of performing that task, you're putting everybody at risk. So having an objective process, and this is an example of what a structured OJT might look like, having something that's objective, having something that everybody is going to be measured against, means that you're going to be safer. You know that each and every individual was measured against the same benchmarks and had to perform to the same degree to be able to operate a piece of equipment. And it does come down to safety. It comes down to reliability of your product. There's just so many components that come into on-the-job training that you want to make sure that you're doing it right. And then last, what we've done is we've also helped our instructors navigate with ease. So we've talked about the fact that we have that special mouse that makes it a lot easier. We've actually converted our PowerPoints into something called Kiosk Mode, which is something that you typically only use at a trade show or any kind of a presentation where you don't have somebody standing there. But what it does is it actually prevents them from clicking on anything else and accidentally getting to a point in the presentation that they don't want to get to. We've included those visual prompts that we've talked about, and again, our goals here are consistent and repeatable delivery. No matter whether you have, third shift supervisor who's delivering this, first shift supervisor who's delivering this, we want to make sure that you always get the same consistent results. So just to wrap up, this is the precision training approach. We could probably spend an hour and a half talking about this, but always like to make sure that these sessions are short, sweet, to the point, so that everybody can get back to their daily job and the things that they need to do. If you ever have any questions, of course, you can contact us. My Twitter handle is Weppel, so you can tweet me. My contact information is on the web, but it's sweppel@gpstrategies.com, or just reach out to GP Strategies and note precision training model, and we'll definitely reach out and give you whatever help you need. But remember that you always need to make sure that you're planning for the future. Training is not a once-and-done thing. Training is this living, breathing component inside your organization. So you need to think not just about what training I need now, but you need to think about what training I'm going to need in 5 years, what training I'm going to need in 10 years. And to save money, make sure that you're building for that future. We want to make sure that we're recalling that prior knowledge. So as we have those incumbent workers or those workers who've been here for a really long time, we're not wasting their time retraining them on things that they already know, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're testing them to make sure that they do know the things that they think they know. We want to include example videos, making media-rich presentations with images and videos and 3D animations and static animations or 2D animations. We want to make sure that we're including all of those rich examples, because that's really going to bring the concepts and the content to life. We want to make sure that we also include those class activities, getting everybody up to the point that they can operate safely before we bring them out onto the floor. So ensuring that everybody has the ability to complete procedures, operate equipment, use the different tools that they need to be able to use before we actually have them operating on the system itself. That's going to include using some interactive screens, so incorporating some games, incorporating some animations, incorporating some activities, keeping things lively, because especially as we have that newer generation coming in, they're not going to want to sit and listen to training for hours on end. You're going to need to keep their focus. Again, safety as a culture, not safety as a module, so incorporating that safety content throughout the entire training session. And having that spill into their day-to-day existence. We also want to think about instructor resources as well, and making sure that we're including support for our instructors as they're doing that on-the-job training, so that that's consistent and that's repeatable, it's measurable, it's objective, and then providing that navigation. So after you develop this training, you can release it to your supervisors, your managers, whoever might be doing training in your organization, and know that they're going to be successful. So again, my name is Sherry Weppel. Thank you so much for joining this session, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Let us know if you need anything, and we hope that you can operate with precision inside your training environment and your organization.